Hello. For this assignment, I explored Oxford Scholarship Online and then Project Muse to find sources that could support one of my research interests, which is Mary, Queen of Scots. And then I found a few articles from JSTOR that I couldn't access in the other databases. So, if I were to explore this topic and make it into a larger research project, I would focus on how political and religious propaganda shaped the reputation of Mary, Queen of Scots during her lifetime and even after her death. Instead of just asking whether Mary was guilty or innocent of accusations made against her, I want to explore how different writers present her to their audiences and how those competing portrayals have continued to influence the way historians and society understand who she is today. The first source I selected is Peter Lake's chapter, Libelous Politics and the Paradoxes of Publicity, The Case for and Against Mary Stuart. This chapter, that is from Oxford Scholarship Online, would likely become the foundation of my research because it explains how Mary's reputation really quickly became the center of a political battle. Lake examines both the attacks against Mary and the writings produced in her defense, showing that printed works were intended to persuade readers just as much as they were intended to report events. His chapter would help me understand in this longer research project how Mary's public image began to take shape almost immediately after the major controversies of her reign. My second source is Jeremy Smith's article, Mary, Queen of Scots as Susanna in Catholic Propaganda. I wanted to include this article because it looks at the topic from a different angle. Rather than just concentrating on political writings, Smith examines the religious symbolism used by Mary's supporters. He explains how Catholics compared Mary to the biblical Susanna, an innocent woman who was falsely accused, and how that image appeared in both portraits and printed works. This source would help me explore how religious imagery became another way of shaping Mary's reputation. The third source is Alexander Wilkinson's article, Mary, Queen of Scots and the French Connection. This article really stood out to me because it expands the discussion beyond England and Scotland. Wilkinson explains that Mary's reputation continued to develop in France, where changing political and religious circumstances eventually transformed her into a Catholic martyr. Including this source, I believe would allow me to compare how Mary's image evolved in different countries instead of limiting the project to Britain alone. While searching Project Muse, I also found Claire Webb's review of Kristen Post Walton's Catholic Queen, Protestant Patriarchy. Even though it's a book review instead of an original research article, I thought it was worth including because it confirms that recent scholarship has shifted away from familiar questions about Mary's personal life and more toward the political and religious debates that surrounded her. Webb explains how Walton focuses on the pamphlets, propaganda, and writings that developed during Mary's reign, and how those debates influenced ideas about government and political authority. Reading this review gave me confidence that the direction of my proposed research fits within current historical scholarship. My final source is John Guy's Queen of Scots, The True Life of Mary Stuart. And I use this for a different research project that I've done before. In this, even though it's a biography, I think it provides an important balance to the other sources. Guy carefully reconstructs the events of Mary's life while still recognizing that many of the best-known episodes have been shaped by later interpretations. Using several chapters from his book would give me the historical background needed to evaluate the arguments made by the other authors and compare those interpretations with the historical record. What I like about these sources is that they build on one another really well instead of repeating the same ideas over and over. Lake provides the overall framework for understanding Mary's reputation. Smith explores Catholic symbolism. Wilkinson broadens the discussion beyond Britain. Webb points toward current scholarly debates, and Guy provides a historical background that ties everything together. Looking at them together gave me a much clearer picture of how I would approach this research project than relying on a single biography or article. Overall, I think this assignment reminded me that developing a research project involves more than just collecting information. It means finding sources that approach the same historical question from different perspectives and using them together to build a stronger understanding of the topic. I think these sources would provide a really good starting point for studying why the reputation of Mary, Queen of Scots, has remained such a debated subject in history. Thank you.